All right, I'm just going to quickly go over some of the common mistakes I saw on your statistics quiz to help you get ready for the fact that we'll want you to kind of know these next year and not make some of these, and many of them are like minor mistakes. So I've highlighted the ones I'm going to talk about, and I will show you how. We'll talk about what your mistakes were and what I want you to do instead. So if I want the mid-interval value, and this one in particular, was interesting because it specifically wants it just for 10 to 15. So I just want the mid-interval value for this particular interval. Some of you listed all the mid-interval values. Some of you actually gave me this mid-interval value. And to be honest, on those, I didn't mark them wrong because you had the right idea and I knew what you were talking about. But on IB, you got to be real careful. If they want just this one, that's all they want. So the mid-interval value is the average of these two. So you would add 10 and 15 and divide by 2. So 10 plus 15 divided by 2 is 25 over 2, which is 12.5. So that's all they wanted on that one. And each of these, to find the mid-interval value, you would have to average the upper and lower bound. Some of you are trying to find the median and you are ignoring this, and I know it says it doesn't include it, but when we find that mid-interval value, we do include it in this little calculation here. A lot of you got this wrong. This is asking you for an estimate of the mean because you don't know these three people. You have no idea where they were in here. They could have been at anywhere between 1 minute and 5 minutes, and you don't know where they are. So to calculate the mean, you have to estimate it using the mid-interval values. So the mid-interval values are halfway in between each of these. So this one, it would be 2.5. This one would be 7.5, 12.5, etc. And then you have a frequency list of how many people were in that interval, and that's when you would use your graphing calculator. And in your calculator, I put in over here all of the mid-interval values, and then this is the frequency, and then you hit stat, calculate, and I'm going to do one variable stats. The values are in list 1, and the frequency list, I have one here, is list 2, so I have to hit second 2, and then I calculate and I get my information. And I'm going to talk about this again in a minute, but because the screen is up, I can point it out. This is your mean right here. This one is your standard deviation. This is if you had a sample, not a population. IB, on the IB exam, if you have a set of data, they're going to assume you're thinking of it as a population. So this would be the standard deviation you would use, not this one. And if I had to find the variance, I would just take this number and square it. So that is our answer to the estimate of the mean. It should have been, unless I put in my data in wrong, I did put my data in wrong somehow because that is not the estimate of the mean I was supposed to have. But that is how you would have calculated the mean. You would have done mid-interval values and type in these things and gone about it that way. So we're going to scroll down through here. This is another one that was commonly missed on here, and we're going to talk about a couple of these as we go. It wants to know the number of people who take more than 23 minutes to drink. So 23 minutes is down here on the bottom. So this is 25 and that's 20, so 22 and a half is right there. So more than 23 is, I got to come up around here somewhere and hit, so I'm just going to hit there, and I'm going to come across and notice the number of people that take more than that are this many people up here. And it looks like I hit at about 45, but so 45 people actually are taking less than 23 minutes, and however many people it is from 45 up to 60 is how many take more. So that actually calculation should have been the total minus where you met that marker of 23 minutes. So it should have given you about 15 people, give or take. All right, moving on to the next question, which I don't seem to have. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Find the median. All right, a lot of you made mistakes on finding the median, and I'll tell you that your mistake was you were thinking that the median was the middle of the times. But these are the people that are in this set of data. So the median is the middle person. So if there's 160 people, whoever the 80th person was the median. So I come over here and I go down, and the median was 40 minutes. So the median was 40 minutes. A lot of you went from here up and over, but when you're asked to find the median from a cumulative frequency, you have to go from the left side. And then the value of B would be the total, or the biggest traveling time, and that would have been this one right here, because that's where the last person was accumulated. Most of you got that one right, but that would be 70, and I just calculated that to be 40. And so now it wants A, and A is first quartile, which is the 25th percentile. So A is going to be halfway between 0 and 80. Whoever that person was, which would have been the 40th person, then you come over and find out that person's time, which is somewhere around here, 33 maybe. That would be 35. So like 32, 33 would be your first quartile. So some of you were coming up with values here that were bigger than the max or bigger than your quartile, third quartile. So that's how you find A. Most of you got the interquartile range right, and it would just be the difference between these two numbers. So even if you got a bad A value, if you did that work correctly, and that's where I had to see your work to know that you were actually doing it correctly. If you showed me no work for this and you had a wrong A value, I have no idea what you did necessarily. So it's good to show work. And then the value of P, they want traveling less than P to be an outlier. So I'm only interested in over here, what's less than this to be an outlier. So you would take your IQR, which was 14, 47 minus 33, times 1.5. That equals 21. And I would take that 21 away from this. So I would do 33 minus 21 would be 12 minutes. So anything less than 12 minutes was an outlier. So this guy was an outlier. Some of you went this side of it, and that's the right idea, but that would be more than P minutes. So if I wanted to find the outliers on this side, I would have done 47, which is your quartile, plus this 21, and I would have gotten 68. And again, that guy would have been an outlier. This is the one I mentioned earlier for standard deviation. So this data is a single list, so you would not use a frequency list here. You would just put these pieces of 8 pieces of data in, do one variable stats, but standard deviation is your sigma. It is not the S. When you take AP stats, you'll use that more. For us, we're going to use this one. And so a couple of you wrote this value down. I just took a little bit away. Otherwise, you guys did pretty well with this. This one was interestingly, there are quite a few wrong on this one. The mode is the thing that happens the most frequently. Here's your frequency list right here. So 28 is the one that happens more than any of the others. So your mode would be 10. Whatever this X represents, 10 happens 28 times. So that's your mode. The range is the max minus the min. Well, these are your values of your variable. The biggest value the variable takes is 11, and the smallest it takes is 2. So you would subtract the values and get 9. A lot of you were subtracting these numbers over here, but these are not the values of your variable. These are how often they occurred. So there you go. Again, this, you would put this in list 1, this in list 2, and you would do one var stats, and you would have to do it with the frequency list. And this is the one I was talking about. You would have to take whatever value you got for sigma and square it, and that would be your variance. Some of you were taking a square root, so there you go. And a lot of you were getting the wrong values in here also, and I think it had something to do with your calculator, but it's hard for me to tell exactly what that was. And I guess I could show you on the calculator what I mean. So if I go back to stat and I go to edit, I think I put this stuff in right. This is where I had a typo, but here are the numbers 2 through 11. This is how frequently they occurred, and there's my, see, so I am putting in a data error. My data entry error is right there at 2. That should have been 21, and I'm checking the rest of them. So there we go. Now if I go to stat, calculate one variable stats, I have to switch my list because I have them in list 3, and list 4 is my frequency. And then when I calculate, bam, this is the standard deviation you should use, and you should be squaring this to get your variance. And then this is your mean. All right, let's see what else we have. That one went pretty well. All right, so this box and whisker plot, I think the reason you guys were getting this wrong was the same reason earlier, that if I have a frequency table, so you'll notice that this 160 is the last person, so my max, and actually it tells you right here, lowest score was 6, highest score was 90. So if I'm over here, I'm like already going, okay, there's my 6, and 90 is as far as I go with my whiskers. Now I got to figure out all this in between stuff. So if 160 is the total number of people, that means the 80th person was the median. So if you come across here, bam, and you go down, and it happens at 48. So my median is at 48. So there we go. That would be my median at 48. And then my third quartile is halfway between these. So halfway between 80 and 160 is 120. So this would be my third quartile. A lot of you are using the bottom of this. You got to use the side to find them, where the quartile, the location, and then go down to find your value. So it would be at 58. It hits right there. So 58, boom, there's my Q3 at 58. And then I need my Q1, which is halfway between 0 and 80. It's the 40th person. And you go over and down, it's right at 40. Boom, there I go at 40. Now I'd say about half of you did this perfect, and half of you, I think, were doing the bottom instead of the side. So anytime you have a cumulative frequency table, this ogive thing, to find the median and the quartiles, you're finding halfway points on the left, and you're going across and down to find the actual value of the numbers. All right, we're running out of time here. This one went pretty well with the exception of interpreting correlation coefficient and slope. A lot of you, for correlation, were interpreting the y-intercept. This is your R value. And you are going to interpret it a couple ways. One, you are going to talk about it being positive or negative. And you're going to talk about it in terms of its strength. So this one was like negative 0.998. So you'd say a negative, very strong linear association between your circumference and distance from the water. And slope in context is the number that was by x in your equation. Most of you found it correctly. It was also negative. And you would talk about it in terms of, for every additional meter away from the bank, the circumference of the tree would be expected to decrease by about, whatever number it was, centimeters. And so this one needed work. And going into AP Stats, you're definitely going to need to do those things. And IB will do them a little bit. So I might reduce the points for this on that one because I didn't really get enough time to work with you on specificity of those. But otherwise, that question went all right. And then over here, this was the only part of this. You guys had a lot of unique techniques to do this. So if I want to, so first off, it's telling you up here that you are going to choose a sample of 9. So your total sample of all of these has to be 9. So I have 60 kids in 9th grade, 83 in 10th, etc. And it wants to show that you would pick 3 kids from this class. So I know there's 160 total kids, I believe. Actually, I don't know if that's true or if I'm just making that up myself. I may just be thinking of a different problem. There are 260 kids. So if you add these all up, you get 260 kids. So some of you did something cool and were like, okay, well, I've got 84 seniors out of 260, and I need to show that I'm gonna how many I would get. How many is that proportionate to taking out of a total? I want my sample size to be 9. So total sample size, total population, number of seniors in the sample. You did a little cross multiplication. Some of you just did this calculation and found that that was about 32%. And you said, well, about a third of 9 is equal to 3. And so that's how, one of those two ways is the way I wanted to see you showing it happening. And then you apply that same strategy to each of these. And oddly, many of you got this part right and had some weird answer up here. So I'm not sure if the directions, what they were asking you, was confusing. Again, that's the drawback to not being able to be there with you. Everything else was pretty well. Those were the big hits. The cumulative frequency one was probably the biggest problem. If you have any questions on any of these solutions that I worked through very quickly, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to expand upon them. Otherwise, see you later.